Okay, I think we're on now, Marvin.
Okay. Welcome to everyone, panelists, and those watching and listening in. It's great to be in, and I just say I think it's a mark of where we've come to as a city, where we're not afraid to have these conversations anymore. It's really important. It doesn't mean that we solve them quickly, and it doesn't mean anyone has all the answers. But facing up to and recognizing the challenge that there are inequalities is the first step. And I think there's been a real chapter change in Bristol, and many of the people on this, everyone on this call are part of that change in self-awareness within the city. We've seen our inequalities really put on the public stage right across the country, but here too over the last year. It's communities, Black, Asian, people of colour, who've been hit disproportionately by the virus, disproportionately likely to spend lockdowns in overcrowded accommodation, disproportionately likely to be performing key worker roles that have left them more exposed. They've also been disproportionately impacted by the consequences of lockdown. We will see that compounding of inequalities, those who are most marginal to the economy being hit first and hardest, and then being least well placed to benefit from the uptick when it comes. We've also seen, a surfacing of tensions as well. The murder of George Floyd wasn't the first and wasn't the only murder that happened to a Black man at the hands of US police or other institutions actually that have a coercive role sometimes. But it was a death that lit up around the world. And actually, just as that started, I was communicating with both Sue and Andy about some previous events that happened in the US, and we were talking about how they could cross the Atlantic because of that connectivity. That led to was part of the catalyst for the toppling of the Colston statue and the debate that took off within Bristol and around the world. After that, and since then we've had a debate in the city about reparations, not just for the history, which I think is a misunderstanding, not just for the history of the transatlantic slave trade, but the present day ongoing inequalities that are part of that legacy, the political, religious, economic system that was set up off the back of that. Those inequalities are found, for example, in the Runnymede report, highlighting that I'm going to use the term ethnic minorities in Bristol experience greater disadvantage than the national average in terms of education and employment. Health and housing inequalities exist, and those from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds are 9.7 times more likely to be stopped and searched than their white counterparts. Even the Somerset Police April to June 2019 report, and 45% of young people in custody identify as Black and minority ethnic. These are challenges that are being faced up to by our institutions, which I say they are with us. We're not proud that they are with us, but we are proud that people are facing up to them. We've taken steps to take action on these fronts. We have a commission on race equality within the city as well, and I thank Professor Oliver Othelli for chairing that. Three main focus task groups: education, leadership and representation, and criminal justice, three critical areas. Remembering back to the amazing work done, Carol Johnson, Councillor Carol Johnson and Asher Craig, to recruit people to the magistracy. At the last count, 12% of magistrates were from Black and minority backgrounds across the UK, 5% in the southwest. And when recruitment went out in 2018, 33 magistrates were recruited in Bristol, 11 were from our Black and Asian backgrounds. That is remarkable. A third of recruits from communities underrepresented. That's the kind of concentrated focus effort we need. So there are many more initiatives in the city that we're all involved in, and we continue to invest in those. So what has been clear over the last few years is the opportunity and importance of agencies working together. Inequality does not sit in a single sector. It is not the product of a single sector's outcomes. It crosses over from housing, to nutrition, to mental health, to education experience, access or not to job opportunities, and it is intergenerational. Remembering that we live in one of the most socially immobile countries in the OECD. We're calling to Alan Milburn's report Elitist Britain a number of years ago, that was endorsed by all party leaders at the time. So it was a kind of valid report, said that the relationship between the British elite and people's socioeconomic background is so strong, it looks like social engineering. And he said, in fact, you have to ask the question, to what extent does the elite in Britain reflect talent and ability and merit rather than social economic background? That is a challenge to our local and national leadership. So there's just a few introductory remarks. We're going to be looking at criminal justice a lot more in depth today. Can I ask the panelists, I'll call you by name, just to briefly say who you are with a brief, just a 1-2 sentence description of what you actually do. So I'm going to go in the order on my screen. Sue.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sue Stevens. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Avon and Somerset. I'm also the joint chair with the Chief Constable of the Local Criminal Justice Board.
Andy.
Thanks, Marvin. Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Marsh, Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset, and I've served in this role for just over 5 years.
Des.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Marvin. My name's Desmond Brown. I'm the independent chair of the Avon and Somerset Lambing Review Group. My day job, I work with young people on the edge of custody, edge of care.
Peter.
Thank you. I'm Peter Blair, and I'm a judge at Bristol Crown Court, where we have 10 courts dealing with the most serious criminal cases. I have a full timetable of judging, but also judicial leadership role in the local criminal justice system, and can help set the tone for our engagement with everyone who is involved in the Crown Court.
Michael.
Good evening, fellow panelists and community. My name is Michael Herford. I am a consultant solicitor specialising in crime. I'm also the founder of Legal Lifelines, which is a firm that represents individuals that find themselves at the mercy of the law, but we also support frontline charities and organisations with the vital work that they do with trying to turn people's lives around. And we do that by commissioning articles from the best legal minds in the country on issues that are affecting the community. And we also involve ourselves in webinars such as this. And we also have a Legal Lifelines app, which hopefully I can talk about in later on, that deals with stop and search.
Joe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Sidhu. I'm a criminal barrister. I've been working within the criminal justice system for nearly 30 years, and I am the vice chair of the Criminal Bar Association, which represents barristers up and down the country who are engaged in the criminal justice system.
And Sace.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sace Lewis. I'm the founder and CEO of Mentivity, which is a mentoring organisation and alternative education provision here in London. I am also working very closely with the Met Police and the Mayor of London around stop and search and training the Met Police.
Thank you all very much. So I'm going to pass back to Desmond Brown now to talk about the local LAMI review group. And after that, then we will go out for questions. I have a few questions already being sent in to me, and we'll work through those as a panel. So Desmond.
Hi, thank you, Marvin. Yes, thank you. I'm having trouble sharing my screen, but I will soldier on. Just a nod to Marvin's comment before. I just wanted to talk about terminology before we start. You know, with Black Lives Matter and the events of last year, the term Black Asian Minority Ethnic BAME or BME is used quite often within the criminal justice system. We haven't been able to cover it within our LAMI review, but I do think that it's very important that we spend time with the people that it affects to look at that phrasing and what we use. But we will be using that, and as clumsy as it is for now, I think it's only proper that we kind of all come to the same term and use it. So I just wanted to start with that. In the short time that I have, I really wanted to just give a high-level overview of the Avon and Somerset LAMI review. I did have some slides, and it's now allowing me to share. So 1 second, if you can bear with me. Let me just get into that. Slideshow.
Yeah, we see them, Desmond.
Brilliant, thank you. So yes, as I said, a high-level overview of the Avon and Somerset LAMI review. I want to kind of get into the current context and then finish off with the legacy of where we're going to go next and how we're going to achieve our aims. And as Marvin said, Bristol is a city that has had a lot of firsts. I am the chair of the Avon and Somerset Land Review, so covering the whole of Avon and Somerset. So we are in a very good position to deliver and start looking at some of the areas that have dogged our communities and the country nationwide for a very long time. So as I said, I'll start with a high-level overview. Forgive me, a lot of people already know some of this information, but it'd be amiss of me not to give you a clear overview. So, as we know, in September 2017, David Lammy published the Lammy Report, and that was a project and commissioned by two Prime Ministers, David Cameron and Theresa May, into the treatment of and outcomes for Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals in the criminal justice system. And he produced 35 recommendations. In the government's response in December 2017, the Lammy Report, it committed to embedding a programme of work to address the racial disparity within the criminal justice system nationwide. The Avon and Somerset Lammy Review was set up in February 2018 and was the Avon and Somerset Local Criminal Justice Board's response to the government's Lammy Review. Its vision was to bring together regional criminal justice partners to produce a data picture of the journey of BME people through the criminal justice system within Avon and Somerset, and most importantly, to proactively address issues of disparity using the review's explain and reform principles. And again, you see the vision there. I was appointed chair on the 1st of May 2019 with the key strategic challenge to work collaboratively with the criminal justice partners to achieve this data picture. There were three clear core principles that I was given: delivering fairness, building trust, and sharing responsibility. So in December 2019, I produced an interim report which identified its initial scope in some areas of data that was available at the time, highlighting immediate areas showing disproportionality across Avon and Somerset. These 6 areas, and stop and search was the first, which wasn't in the Lammy Review, but due to the fact of building trust and stop and search, as we will talk about later, has been something that has been a weight on communities across the country. It was really important that we address those and shy away from that. Youth justice, again, this didn't take up much of the Lammy Review, but it was something that he was very, very concerned about, and he spoke about that and has spoken about that since. So we thought it was proper for us to look at that. Prisons, the judiciary, and His Honour Judge Blair, I'm very glad that sits and leads that focus group, out of court disposals, and then recruitment, retention and development. So my review hasn't undertaken new research. Instead, its aim has been to benchmark outcomes for BME people as they travel through the criminal justice system and consider how existing knowledge and data can be applied to find solutions to these issues now. And this kind of covers what the recommendation, the first recommendation of David Lammy's review was. So scrutiny, as we know, is the best route to fair treatment alongside consistency, openness and rigour. There must be a no excuse culture within Avon and Somerset, and I think that we're getting there. My review has introduced Lammy's principle of explain and reform for racial disparities across the criminal justice system in Avon and Somerset. This means that partners need to provide evidence-based explanation for apparent disparities. And if not, then reforms need to be introduced to address them. And again, this covers recommendation 4. So the way that we've approached this, we approached this with transactional. What can we do now with the interaction that communities have across the criminal justice system? Transitional, how can we move things into an area that we want to? And then transformational. Now, I must stress, this part of the Lammy Review is phase 1. This isn't a review that will be in a pamphlet, on a shelf and collecting dust. It is very important that this review has looked at the available data and is a starting point to benchmark where we go. And we will do that across each of those 3 themes using a model of what do we need to stop doing, what do we need to start doing, and what do we need to continue doing. So Again, when I first started this, I, as a layperson, assumed that we were much further down the road with data collection. Unfortunately, in some areas, we have found that we are not in a position that we thought we were. Therefore, methodology has to be produced so that we can share data. And also that this data has to be shared and used in a way that is meaningful. I think a lot of focus on the data and what we were doing it was lost. And people didn't really have an idea of why or what they were collecting the data for. And as part of this review, we have created a methodology that will allow us now to be more focused and efficient with our collection of data. Along with this report, and again, the report will be delivered at the end of May, and I don't want to give away too many of the recommendations, as it wouldn't be fair on stakeholders, and the report needs to be published and public facing. Again, here you can see the stakeholder and governance of the LAMI review. As Sue mentioned, we sit underneath the local criminal justice board with a lot of support from the OPCC and the constabulary as well. And we have those 6 areas of priorities and key stakeholders from across the county, but also nationally. One of the areas that is most often questioned is the lived experience of people. And we have tried to, with this report, to bring that to life. Data won't be the silver bullet that we're looking for. And as we've seen across many areas, that this is a problem that communities often talk about. We're always talking about the data. We're always looking for that silver bullet that will solve it. Until qualitative data, that's lived experience, is valued as highly as the data, we will always be searching for those ways of finding that silver bullet. So it's very important within this review that we have had surveys and talked to not only people who are involved in the criminal justice system front facing, but also, for instance, police officers around stop and search. We've talked to young people about their experiences, out of court disposals. So it's very much that we want that to come to life and to value those contributions as I don't believe have been valued before. I'm kind of realizing that I'm running out of time, and this is such a wide area that I've just got to be very focused and not to go off on tangents. But it is very important that we look at this, and in Avon and Somerset, I do believe that we have started the process of moving forward. Moving on to the context, we've had a slew of reports in the last year, not at least with COVID itself, but we've had Doreen Lawrence's report that has really unearthed some of the footings of the structural racism that we've seen. We have had the Joint Committee on Human Rights on the 4th of November published their report. And again, we've had, in the last month, we've had the Stuart Hall Foundation that looked back over the reviews and reports since Scarman, and there was 589 recommendations that are still sitting there waiting to be delivered. So this really is very important that we do not allow this to slip this time. You know, we cannot have instances, a review, inaction, and start again. We need to get hold of this, resource this properly, the legacy of the work that we're doing in Avon, Somerset. Again, you know, we are working with Wiltshire, Devon, we've had contact with Hertfordshire Police, and there is really a momentum now moving around some of these issues. I suppose the last thing, because I really want to get onto some questions as soon as we can and invite other people to join in the conversation. One of the products and the issues that we've had over the years is that we start again with this evidence. Avon and Somerset Constabulary have amazing data. Their collection of data is probably the best in the country. So using that, we have created a LAMI app. When I spoke to David Lammy about this, he laughed, and I didn't realise that obviously calling it a LAMI app would tickle him so much, but it did. But this app is across all these 6 areas. And within that, the idea is that we will own that information, and the legacy will be that that will always be there for us to then be able to look at in real time the disparity that exists. And we can drill in it without having to go through this again of looking at the data. You know, we can build on the data, and there will obviously be more data that will be required, but we have a foundation that we can start to embed and start dealing with some of these issues. And I said again, this is the first stage. This isn't the last stage. This is when we've looked at the data, and then we can now move forward. So that's really important. And again, you know, the work that we've done at the moment is still being analysed. So it would be amiss of me to kind of give you a preview of the recommendations. But throughout the chat, you know, I can talk about some of the findings, the initial findings that we had. I'm hoping that's okay, Marvin.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Desmond. So we're going to move very quickly into questions now, and I've been given 6 questions that have been selected from a range that were pre-submitted by stakeholders attending the event. And so I will go through those questions, and there's been a suggestion. I have some suggested names against all those questions, and so I'll go to the panelists who've been recommended to me. So we don't all have to answer every question. I think we'll take a selection, but if you're desperate to answer, then please just indicate to me. So the first question is, what is being done to improve wider BAME representation within the criminal justice system, including within the police, OPCC, judiciary, and the legal profession? And the first name against this is Andy Marsh.
Marvin, thank you, Desmond, for summing up remarkably broad work so well and so quickly. So first of all, I applaud the efforts to have uncomfortable conversations. That is my job as police chief, to be a catalyst for change. But what we try and do is the uncomfortable conversations don't become divisive, and that's something which I think Marvin exercises with expertise in holding Bristol, a global city, together. In terms of representation, I'd say there's 2 things. First of all, we won't be representative if we're a service that offers services and uses its powers in an unequal, unfair way. So it's incredibly important that we continue to throw scrutiny and transparency over the offer we make the public. And some of the disparity in stop search, use of force, COVID enforcement is uncomfortable. And we need to be transparent about it, and we need to explain or reform. And just in respect of that, we are, I think, possibly the only police force that does comply with all HMIC recommendations. For example, on the use of body-worn video at all stop search, and 17% of all stop searches are subject to external scrutiny, and a rich vein of feedback follows. Some of it you got to do better, and some of it that's good. In terms of reform or explain, we have reformed in some ways. We no longer, I no longer give my officers authority to do a stop search on the smell of cannabis alone. We have a number of different aspects that we've tried, and is it enough? And have we yet dealt with the inequality and disparity? No, we have not, but that doesn't mean we give up. So first of all, if we're fair looking out, more people want to come and join us. Internally, we're the only force in the country that has got the national equality index standard that we've achieved. We've tried some other big ideas in terms of recruiting a team of outreach workers drawn from the very heart of the community that can take at the offer of the remarkable range of employment opportunities that we have in policing out into the community. We have an ambition, and inclusion is one of our core values. We've only got 4. We want to be the most inclusive police force in England and Wales. What does that mean? So we're doing all sorts of things to achieve that. And we've seen steady but significant improvements, Marvin. But have we done enough with our internal environment and our external service offer yet? Absolutely not. And we will not stop trying until we get there.
Thank you, Andy. So I have 3 other names against this question, and feel free not to answer if you don't wish to, but I got Sue, Peter and Joe. Sue?
Okay, so thank you, Marvin, and Thank you, Desmond. I think one of the things that we were very clear with the Lamy review, that it didn't become just another talking shop and just another way of pushing it into the long grass. And certainly it's been expertly chaired by Desmond, and he certainly will not allow it being pushed into the long grass that we have in the insurance. But let us look at why are we doing all this? Well, the reason that we're doing this is because there is disproportionality. We're not being defensive. We acknowledge that there is that. And the reason we want to change it is because we want to take our communities with us. And we will not do that if we do not look like our communities. So the whole point of policing by consent is that the police have to be the community and the community and the police. And that is the reason that in order to maintain, to police by consent, we need our communities to be confident in the police, and also for us to have that legitimacy that we are the community. So that's, I think, the reason that we're here. If we talk about my team, I have a very small team in comparison to 6,000 in the constabulary. I have just over 30 members of staff. I have 3% representation of BAME, which I accept is not enough. So, and especially if I am challenging the constabulary all the time to reflect that the police have to reflect the community, then what am I doing when my team does not? So I fully accept that we need to do more. We have a scrutiny of police powers panel, which we'll talk about later on, I hope, and that has a 43% representation from BME. So we know we can do it. It's just that we need to follow the process. But we need to, and what we've done so far is that when we have vacancies, we've made sure we've targeted those vacancies. We've shared our vacancies with the Black Police Association, with the Bristol Stepping Up programme. We're working with the BASA, the City of Change campaign, and we intend to work very closely with Marvin, who's leading the Black Interns programme, which will be coming out later this year. So I'm not defensive. Where we are is not good enough, but we absolutely know that by having openness and transparency and by talking about it, that actually we will be able to deliver change. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you, Sue. Peter and then Joe.
Yeah, well, as Marvin, you mentioned a moment ago, there's been some big efforts to try and improve the magistracy's representation, which has made some good starts, but I think pressure's just got to be kept up on that. So that is good in terms of that being very much a focus to improve wider representation amongst magistrates. There is an uncomfortable conversation, I'm sure, to be had about those magistrates who sit in the youth court, because I think one of the biggest problems we have is in the youth courts and the disproportionate numbers of black defendants who are going through that system and getting custodial sentences in particular, for which there are all sorts of reasons, but the magistracy who are sitting in the youth court, I think we need to look very closely at that. It's really slow in terms of the judiciary. I have 8 judges sitting in my court, and they're here for careers as judges, 15, 20 years. And you may have seen the press last week saying that judges' retirement age is going to be increased to 75. So I don't know how to kick them out or to kick myself out to try and create some space for new people. But what we do have to work at is the recruitment into judicial tiers. And so I did a webinar last summer for a local initiative called Bar One, which is trying to get more black and minority ethnic applicants looking at judicial careers. And so I was helping them through how to start constructing a really impressive CV for the future when they come to that stage. The local bar, in fact, in the West Country, there is an initiative so that work experience, mini pupillage as it's often called, chambers are insisting they're going to give 50% to minority groups so that there'll be an extra opportunity to see an area of work that people might not do. And yeah, I'm constantly trying to persuade more and more people to apply and support them through the system. And I'm really, really enthusiastic and passionate about it. as many people know, I'm just frustrated that it's so slow to move into this part of the criminal justice system.
Joe.
Marvin, I think the starting point for understanding what we need to do to improve representation is to recognize how broad and how expansive the criminal justice system actually is. It was once described as an ecosystem with interdependent parts. So you've got obviously the courts, you've got the judiciary, you've got the police service, probation, you've got the prison service, and you've got everybody in between who individually and collectively contribute to keeping our criminal justice system moving as efficiently and as smoothly as possible. But what we have is very real pockets of underrepresentation of people of color. So I sit here speaking to you as the Vice Chair of the Criminal Bar Association, and in September I'll take on the position of being the Chair. I'm only the second person of color in its 52-year history who has taken this responsibility up. But it's fundamental that those who are at the top of these organizations do indeed reflect their communities, but that they are people who actually want to effect change for the better. So it's no good, for example, having black or brown people ascending to positions of power and then doing little to nothing about actually reforming those institutions and organizations so as to ensure that they are accessible and fairly reflect their communities. So it's really important to have programs in place. What I see as perhaps the potential weakness is the lack of conversations taking place in between these constituent elements. So the judiciary will talk to the bar will talk to the law society, the police will sometimes engage with the judiciary, occasionally they'll deal with us at the bar, but there's very few roundtable conversations where we can identify where the deficiencies lie. But what is really important in my view is this: it's essential to have leaders from every community within the country, because if you have those leaders there, they can effect cultural change within those organizations. Their mere presence signals to the public that there is an intent to change and to reform for the better. As individual men and women who sit at the top of these organizations, they are much better placed to understand what the needs are for reform in order to drive those reforms through, because they have the personal passion and commitment to do so. So I think what we need to have actually is an across-the-board review of where the weaknesses and deficiencies are, and ask those institutions who are doing less than others, why are you so slow? And Peter picks up on a very important point about the judiciary. And if I may, the point really about the judiciary is we have a lot of minorities at the lower echelons of the judiciary. We have a significant number at Crown Court level. Where we have a real problem is above the Crown Court level, in the Court of Appeal and amongst High Court judges, and indeed in the Supreme Court. And if we don't have that signal from the very top of the judiciary, the problem is that some people will feel that that glass ceiling can never be broken.
Thank you very much. And I will say, just from my personal perspective, Des may say the same in Bristol. We have found, I think, in Sue, Andy, Peter, people who want to have these conversations. And a friend of mine, Lebanese friend of mine, said a problem well defined is a problem half solved. But it means we've got to get our hands right around this problem and properly understand it, and not be shy of a proper understanding. So I'm going to go on to the next question now, but I would just say, if you want to refer back to any points you would have put in a previous question, please do. Obviously, manage the time, but so that we get a bit of fluidity here. But the second question pre-submitted we had was, after attending 2 community engagement events in Bristol this week, involving conversations with groups of young black people and people of colour about their views on policing, it was sad to hear that some felt that the whole criminal justice system is so broken and set against them that although they all agreed that representation matters, they didn't feel they could make a difference as individuals by joining any of the agencies or professions. Some said they would never encourage any of their friends or their future children to join. There were also others who were doing really positive sports diversionary work with even younger people in their community, but having to pay for it out of their own pocket because they can't tap into support and funding to help them. So the question was, what needs to happen, or what do we need to do as agencies to give some of the more disillusioned young people hope and confidence that working together we can make a difference? And how can we better engage and support those who are more hopeful and already doing good work in their communities change things? So I'm going to Sace and Michael for this one. But if you'd like to bleed over anything from the first question, please feel free to do so. So start with you, Sace.
Thank you, Marvin. Yes, I think the most important thing we need to do with young people is invest in them and invest time in them, because of the bureaucracy around funding and also a lot of large organizations that in essence are middlemen to community groups that are delivering on the ground. We need to get rid of that whole process. And we need to really now revamp the way that we're supporting young people in a holistic way. And the problem that we have is that education hasn't changed in 50, 60, 70 years. And I'm talking of informal education, but also formal education. We need to bring these together because young people learn in different ways. And we haven't shaped the environment which has allowed them to prepare themselves for life. And young people are very disillusioned because we have led them down this path. The adults have led them and they have a real lack of trust. So when you bring this now to the police and the way that they've been treated historically, this kind of intergenerational trauma and interaction with the police has been passed on via the families to the children who have this outlook with the police. And the minute they see something quite negative that may happen to themselves or someone else, then this reinforces that worldview. So I think it's really, really important for us in terms of the outreach, and what we're trying to do is really building the trust between the community and the police, but really investing that time in young people again, but allowing young people to lead these conversations. We routinely speak about young people and we don't include them in the conversation. And that's the important thing, is that we're not allowing them to improve their critical consciousness and actually improve their decision making, because we're not entrusting them and giving them that responsibility. So we really got it all wrong. And I think that we really need to revamp that and change it and really just integrate ourselves within the communities and understand that we need to allow the community to lead these discussions, allow young people to lead these discussions so that they're ready when they come to adulthood to make better decisions. And that's where I think we're falling short.
Michael?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Say's put it incredibly well, and I'd like to also thank Avon and Somerset for having this very open conversation, but it fills me with sadness because actually, my understanding of the statistics that I've done my research, and it was, if you were a young black person in Avon and Somerset, you were 7.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched. But actually, it's from what Desmond just said, it's gone up to 9.7, if I heard correctly. And that is absolutely, that's outrageous. No wonder people are so angry and disillusioned. And when you get stopped multiple times a day sometimes, it creates a distrust of the police. And you know, it's deemed as a rite of passage nowadays. And it shouldn't be. And that's been, as Stacey mentioned before, it's been passed down from parents and their parents before them. And whether you're in Avon and Somerset, or if you're in London, Bradford, Leicester, people of colour are having the same knot going on in their stomach, worried about you know, either their interaction with the police or the interaction of their children. And the thing that we need to understand is that it's not, these aren't just statistics that we're throwing around, you know, casually in a conversation. These are Stace Holmes Lewis's, they're Joe Sidhu's, they're Marvin's, they're me. I've been stopped and searched multiple times, and I have to say that not by even Somerset, I might add, but you know, police, but you know, and most of the time it's okay, as in yes, I'm treated and I'm spoken to, you know, fairly respectfully. But on one occasion, it was completely traumatic, and I was screamed at and sworn at, and it left me completely shocked and, you know, disillusioned by the police myself, to be quite honest. And what we have to realise is that stop and search is a gateway into the criminal justice system. And if you're 9.7 times more likely to be stopped than anybody else, then you're 9.7 times more likely to find yourself before His Honour Judge Blair, Queen's Counsel, and at the mercy of the law. And if you come into contact with the criminal justice system, it affects everything. It affects your ability to work, your ability to retain work, your ability to stay and engage with education. And you know, that, and in fact, sometimes stop and search creates the offence in the first place. If you've been stopped for the 4th time in a day, or even the 6th time, and there'll be some people saying, oh, you don't get stopped 6 times in a day. Yes, you do. I know an eminent Queen's Counsel in London that was stopped 6 times in a day. And sometimes you're going to be, if it's the 6th time in a day, you're going to be less polite than the first time. And then you might find yourself being arrested for a public order offence, where you might not want to stay and talk to the officer and walk away and end up getting arrested for, you know, for obstructing police, and that is listed as a positive outcome in the stop and search statistics. So I'd encourage for the authorities, if it's not being recorded already, to record those statistics so that we really can analyse what's going on here. And it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that black people are actually responsible for some sort of crime rate, which just isn't right. Okay, and what it also does is it allows because people are scared of the police, and literally scared of the police, it then makes the vulnerable people more open to grooming gangs, because if they can't go to the police with their problems, then who do they go to? And people start resorting, to their own means to try and survive. Now, in terms of solutions, I'd encourage authorities to engage more with frontline organisations like Safe Homes Lewis to come in and work with our youngsters, but also with the police about training. There needs to be focused training on how to interact with people who are fed up to the back teeth of being over-policed, to be quite frank. We've seen during the pandemic, people that aren't usually engaged with the police who have been subjected to their scrutiny, and it's not fun. We need more community policing. We need to push the idea of comply and complain, which I first heard from Dr. Angela Herbert, to stop these incidents where people are getting criminalised by the stop itself. And I think that actually it's such a serious situation that maybe it needs to be brought into the school curriculum, because it's affecting some people so much that we need proper state training on how to interact with the police and how to deal with this situation. And lastly, I did mention that Legal Lifelines had an app, which is the first of its kind in the world, which when you press the SOS feature, it starts saving footage immediately to a separate cloud, which allows people to access it immediately if the phone's damaged or destroyed. And I would encourage people, the authorities, to start, maybe we can set up a committee where people can immediately review that footage, and what's more, connect the top of policing to what's going on the front line to check the reasoning. How many times have I've been stopped and been accused of smoking weed, or that there was something that went on up the road that I need to be stopped on? There's no way of the community checking whether or not that's accurate, and that needs to change. There needs to be more accountability, and if that officer that stopped me saying that something happened up the road, if I could check that and the chief constable could cross-reference that to see whether or not that stop was legitimate, that's going to drive down this disproportionality, because it's going to make people accountable.
Can I just come in?
Sorry. Yes.
I'm just conscious. I've got quite a few more questions, and I don't want to get in there. That's great. No, just because it's harder to chair by Zoom and team.
Quite passionate.
But Andy, you've raised your hand, so can I allow you just to come in there? But then we're going to whip through the rest of the questions there. Andy.
Well, first of all, I recognise what Michael says, although I haven't got lived experience, and obviously it causes me deep concern. That's not what we want. The question is, what are we going to do? And Michael did address that, in fairness to him. First of all, we never give up. The second thing is, first thing I did when I came to work this morning was I had a mentoring discussion with a black inspector who migrated to this country aged 10, who's going for his chief inspector board. We need brave people who are prepared to have a go and put some skin in the game, so to speak. And we've got those people. I need the community support them and not do what Marvin worked so hard to prevent, is the difficult discussions become divisive. If it becomes a battle of points of view as opposed to an agreed solution, we've got a problem. So I'm with you, Michael. The other thing is that we need to intervene early. Sue Mount Stevens asked me to protect the neighbourhood officers in Avon and Somerset. Got 700. And we must do that. I was happy to agree, because they need to build good experiences with young black communities. And actually that starts in school. So all of those things are incredibly important. But I plead really with the community to hold us to account. Don't accept this is good enough, but give us a chance, because we want to learn and improve.
Thank you. I mean, this is just an initial hour, but there'll be many conversations that have led up to this that will spill out of this as well. It's not a one-time solution. Desmond, I've had a question here asking were individuals, community and organisations with lived experience factored in when working on and drafting this Avon and Somerset local Lammy review?
Yeah, thank you, Marvin. Well, just to be quite straightforward, we're still in a part of drafting it, and yes, they were. I just want to go back, and I think it's linked. Trust is central, and it was central to the whole of the Lammy review itself, and it's central to the review we've got now. There is a trust deficit within communities, and this isn't just with the police. This is with the courts. This is with magistrates. This is with their own legal teams, and that's why it's so good to have this legal people on this call. But yes, they were, again, with some of the young people, we do find that we often ask them questions and we don't, and we ask them for their opinions and consult with them, and then nothing happens with it, and they don't follow that through. And so with this, we had quite a lot of information that's been collected over the last 2 years, and abundant information for young people about their experiences of the criminal justice system.
Marvin, I think the cornerstone of our system must be that our public justice system is exactly that. It's a system open to scrutiny by members of the public. And the public, of course, comprise many different people from different communities. Last year has been a pretty terrible year for allowing people to come in and watch cases. I'm one of those who believes it's fundamentally important that the public are encouraged to go down to their local court centres and observe justice taking place in practice. But because of social distancing restrictions, last year has been a bit of a washout for that. Now we are moving into a new era, hopefully post-COVID. I want to see if I can, a real encouragement to members of the public to come to court. So I think it's important that judges see them sitting there, that advocates see them sitting there, and very importantly, defendants see them sitting there, because it's the eyes and ears of the public that will help to discipline the participants within the criminal justice process, so that people take it as seriously as it deserves to be taken. Secondly, we can't rely, as Peter says, on the media. The tragedy has been that whilst the media is meant to be the conduit through which information that takes place within courtrooms that's not seen more broadly in society is relayed to them, the way in which that is done is often below par. And what I mean by that is that you get selective reporting.
It's that public accountability that's absolutely key. And also, I think something that Avon and Somerset Constabulary have done is that quick time debrief, working with community leaders when there is an issue. I think that has reflected well, and that openness has reflected well with what we're doing. I'm hoping that with the work that Desmond is doing, that maybe we have some sort of charter. This is what a good stop and search looks like. This is how we can educate our people, especially our young black men. So having a video of what a good stop and search is, having some data about, our handcuffs use, it's that increase, drilling down into detail, I think is going to give our communities confidence that we're not hiding anything.
Thank you very much, Sue, and thank you to all of you as panelists and those listening. If you didn't get your question asked, I'm sorry about that, limited on time, but this is not the end of the conversation. There's just really quick next steps, the key dates for the report, next steps.
So the key dates are May for the report, but the draft report will be at the beginning of April, and that will go out to stakeholders for comment. But really, as I said, this is the beginning of the journey. I would like to do more of this for a longer time. I know, it seems gone very quickly, but it is also that we need the community to take part. There are a lot of things happening within, I'm part of scrutiny groups that look at stop and search and scrutiny of police powers, that people in the community through our workshops didn't know was happening, and they've been going for two or 3 years. And I would encourage communities to get involved, and that's what we need to do. But we need to make sure this legacy is embedded, and we don't let this sit on a shelf and just gather dust. This is a living document.
Thank you, Des. And I'd encourage people to step up. You know, a point I used to share when I was at the BDA, if we're waiting for a perfect invitation from the perfect system, it ain't coming. You know, we have to step up anyway. And they say the world is run by those who turn up. So we do need to turn up, even you know, even with our doubts, and just do our best to make things work. Thank you all. Thanks for the work that's been done here, Des. You've taken a lot on. Really appreciate your leadership on this. Really significant for the city. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.